I'm Brenda. Welcome back to my quilt room. It's been a while since we were together back in July, and I want to give you an update on the Ocean Waves block. Here's the block that I showed you how to put together so that it didn't have any odd triangle units that you had to put together at 60-degree angles and so forth, so it would be easier to put together. So this was my scrappy block. So I want to show you the progress that I've made on that. I had a fat quarter pack of 16 different fat quarters. And so what I decided to do was that I was going to scrap them up to make my Ocean Waves block. And here is how they came out. I'm really happy with it. And I think it's going to look really nice when I get this together. Now I'm learning to do something new, which is quilt as you go. And you actually quilt your quilt blocks and then sew them together. And here's what I picked for the back. Now this wasn't part of that tea service collection of the 16 fat quarters because they didn't have that one anymore, but I picked this one. It's a different tea service collection from Connecting Threads, and I picked this one because of the busy all over pattern, so that when you go to connect your squares at each of the sides, it will sort of help hide those seams. And so that's what I've picked out for the back. Now I've completed 6 blocks thus far. And I think that they're coming out really nice. Here, I hope that you can see the quilting lines. And I'm not sure if you can, but what I did was I started on the second row of the half square triangles. I divided it in half, and then I simply followed a triangle around and around and around until it got small in the middle on both sides. And we'll see if you can can you see that in the light? I'm not sure how well you can see it or not, the quilting lines that I have there so far. So I've left myself plenty of room on the sides here of this first row, so that when I go to join it to my next block, I'll be able to peel these back and pin those 2 sections together as I sew them. That will probably be another video by the time I finish quilting all of these squares. Now, there's a couple of different ways that you can put it together. You can layer the back and your batting and your block, and you can pin it together with just these quilting pins. They're kind of got a little curve to them. And I pinned one out and turned it over and looked at the back, and I wasn't happy with how many ripples and things that I thought could potentially take place as I was trying to quilt it. So what I opted to use was this, and I'm not endorsed to endorse products or anything, but this is what I used, the 505 temporary adhesive. Now I bought this at Hobby Lobby, and I went with this one versus, I've used this one a few times. This one is very smelly, and if you're going to use it in a small contained area, you really need good ventilation. This one doesn't seem to have any odor or anything like that, and it was easier to use, in my opinion. So what I did was, of course, I laid my backing down and then the batting, and then I used the spray adhesive on both sides and smoothed it out as smooth as I could possibly get it. And it's very forgiving. You can unpeel this and then you can peel it right back down. But I wanted to make sure that I left myself this 2-inch openness here at the edge for when I join my blocks together. Now the batting that I'm using is a Mountain Mist product, and I bought this at Hobby Lobby, and I'd never bought it before, but it said that it was ultra fine, and I didn't want a very high loft batting, especially since I was going to be quilting this on my own machine. So this is what the batting looks like. It was really easy for me to roll it out. You can see, you know, it's thin. It's not high loft or bulky. It's very easy to put in between the quilt sandwich here. And it was really easy to quilt through. I didn't have any trouble quilting through it. I'm pretty pleased with it. If I continue on with these methods, I'll probably purchase some more of that. And I think the price tag on here is, it was $9.50 at Hobby Lobby. So that's where I bought that at. Again, I'm not endorsing one store over another. And so I've had pretty good success with this. It didn't take me very long to quilt these. Now, to mark my block when it was sandwiched, this is an air-soluble marking pen, and it marks in a purple color. And like it says, it just dries over time after it's out in the air. Again, I didn't use this when I laid my lines down because I wanted to do something that was very geometric. And by the time I would have finished marking one side, then it would have already disappeared. I like to use the friction pins, and I use them quite a bit. But I didn't on this because it has so much white, and I have found a few times that the friction pin has actually left a little bit of residue on my quilt top. So I opted to not do this method either. And of course I could have used a chalk pencil, but with this primarily being white, then I wasn't going to be able to see my line to follow that. So I've seen a few videos where people will use just the masking tape. And since what I was doing was going to be very linear, that's what I went for. And obviously, when I did this, I used a longer piece of tape. But what I did, I just laid the tape down right beside the intersections of where the blocks came together. And then when I put it under the sewing machine, I just stitched along the line of the tape. And it's really easy to just pick it up and move it from line to line. And that's how I quilted it. When I got down here to the center, I used to the edge of where I was going to stop. I used another piece to angle off so that I would know where I wanted my needle to stop. So if you look at this one, then right in here, this is where I had my needle stop. So I knew to turn and to continue on until I got down here. I followed the same path and I just did a triangle around and around and around. And then I turned it over and I did the same thing on this side. So I figured that might look better once I put them together. Then I will just simply outline the square as I join my blocks together. So I wanted to show you this, give you an update on where I am with it. There'll be some more progress that you can see as I'm going along and putting these together. Now I quilted this on my new machine that I told everyone I had gotten several months ago. So I tested out my stitches, picked out my color of thread, and did some practice stitching before I actually started on my quilt block. I did use my quilting gloves that have the little nubs on them, because these do help you control your stitching as you're guiding it through your machine. I have my walking foot on the machine, and I set my settings. The stitch length is at 3 and the width was at the normal setting of 3.5. The thread that I'm using is a connecting threads spool, and it's a 70 weight thread, and that's a thinner thread. This is a 50 weight thread that I typically use, and if you have many different kinds of thread, you would be able to feel the difference. A 70 weight thread is going to help you get your blocks to lay flatter. Now I use this 50 weight when I put my blocks together. That's what I used, but for quilting I'm using the 70, and a lot of times people will use that when they stitch in the ditch, and I did stitch in the ditch in the perimeter, and then I'll be stitching again once I join those blocks together. So this is how far I've come on my Ocean Waves blocks, and they're scrappy and I'm happy with it. I think it looks really good. Now I want to show you the quilt that's displayed behind me. This is one I made several years ago. I like to do applique. It came from this book called A Flair for Fabric. And in it, this is a Jill Finley pattern, if you're familiar with anything that she does. It's called Breezy. And it has a lot of applique, and I put some buttons on there. And this one came out to be 86 by 86. So that's where that pattern came from, and it came from this book if you're interested in doing some applique. And I think that I pretty much covered everything. That's all I have right now. I'm going to continue to work on this, and I'll do another update once I start actually joining the blocks together. And I may throw in a new quilt block sometime in between. So until the next time, we'll see you later.